The season of giving is underway with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Dr. Priscilla Chan announcing they plan to give away 99% of their Facebook shares during their lives. As of now, that amounts to about $45 billion. Could this be another testament of his leadership skills? Joining us this morning is Jeff Sonnenfeld, Senior Associate Dean for Executive Programs at the Yale School of Management, and Bill George, Harvard Business School professor and a CNBC contributor. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Good morning.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
Bill, I know you've called this stunning, you've called this historic, and yet people still have questions about this LLC structure. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is historic because no young person this young has ever given away 99% of such a large amount of net worth. And it could have a huge impact over the next many decades. And clearly in Mark's letter, he's indicating a very long-term view of trying to cure disease, change education, connect communities. Very inspiring, very idealistic, I should add. The LLC gives him a chance, though, to go beyond just giving money away as a 501c3, but actually influence policy. And it's clear that he and Priscilla want to try to influence policy and work with others, like in clean energy and other fields. So I think his intentions are much broader. This guy is a remarkable leader who's matured very rapidly since he founded Facebook and surrounds himself with very wise people.
Yeah, certainly the company's trajectory connotes that, Jeff. But now sort of this structure does sort of as well, some argue. You agree?
I think the good news overwhelms any of the complexity of the structure. But I do think there's an important message in the structure, Carl, and you're right to flag it. But I hate to agree with Bill so often these days, but I do. And, you know, Bill comes from a city of enormous philanthropy from the corporate sector. In Minneapolis, this would even stand out there. But for Silicon Valley, astoundingly so. A lot of the press has gotten it wrong a little bit by suggesting this is unusual for this generation, for the millennial era generation. The odd thing is that this life stage, at this young, regardless if this was baby boomers or the Bobby Soxers or the great soldier generation of World War II, early career, this account of this kind of philanthropy is rare. I mean, the great dynastic wealth usually happens in later stages. The Rockefeller money obviously came from John D. Rockefeller's son, not John D. Rockefeller was giving dimes away, and Henry Ford, the Ford Foundation, of course, followed in his wake. Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, his money came in the final years of his life. He gave away 3,000 church organs and or 20,000 church organs, 3,000 public libraries and foundations. They all came at the end. Even Gates and Buffett. It's quite late. Ted Turner had to provoke them.
You know, Bill, I wonder if it is, whether it's a function, as Jeff is suggesting, I think, of technology and the fact that with social media you can make so much money so young as a programmer or however you term it, or actually it's more about a different generation that sees the importance of living their life in balance and having to give back as they go, which is what I would experience talking to tech entrepreneurs here in New York, young people. And then, of course, I read the notes for this interview and I see that you've actually meditated for 40 years and meditate for 20 minutes as you get on every flight, former board member of Goldman Sachs, so on and so forth. So I wonder where we are. Is this a generational thing or is it a technology thing?
I think it's a generational thing. I think the millennials are very focused on giving back. They've looked at a lot of the baby boomer generation as more focused on themselves and building up their wealth and maybe giving it away later, maybe not. And I think this is going to influence a lot of young entrepreneurs to give away a lot more money. But I think the more significant thing here, Simon, is this is actually going to be the driving force in creating social change over the next 2 to 3 decades. We've found the stalemates of government, particularly the United States government. Business has done a lot of good work, but it has some limitations from the investment community. So I think we're going to see philanthropy become the driving force to actually change society.
Hang on. Why should, this is a very important question. Why should individuals be able to succeed where governments or multinational organizations or charities have been unable to succeed? Because if you look at the gifts they've already made, Bill, I think Zuckerberg himself would admit that they've actually not been executed terribly well.
Well, I can tell you, my wife and I decided to give away 90% of our net worth about 10 years ago, and it's hard work to give it away thoughtfully. And this is going to take a lot of work. I mean, we're pikers compared to the Zuckerberg, but this is a huge amount of money. Yes, they're going to have to spend a lot of time, and they're going to have some very skilled people. One of the people on his board is Sue Desmond-Hellmann, who's now running the Gates Foundation. She's a very wise person. I'm sure she'll be advising Mark about how to create the LLC and how they're going to manage it, because he's got a big job to do. He's got a family and all of those things. And so I think there's a lot yet to come. But I'm eager to see how many people will sign on. Give credit to Bill Gates and then later Warren Buffett for what they've done in setting the leadership.
I think it's important
but at this
to point
age,
out
I think it will create great societal change. But I think it's a targeting thing, whereas governments are stalemate and spread the money all over. I think in this case, the Zuckerbergs can target their money and say where they want to go. Yes, there'll be money like Newark, which didn't produce itself much, but you've got to have some failures,
Jeff?
too. It's like new ventures. So I give them credit
Jeff?
for going after it.
Yes.
And we'll see.
Before we run out of time, I did want to bring up another point here, which is much less talked about than the 99% headline, and that is the fact that Mark Zuckerberg is taking a 2-month paternity leave. It really highlights some of the problems that corporations have. Is he setting a standard here as well when it comes to maternity and paternity leave, which we are so far behind as a country? I think California is only one of 3 states that offers paid maternity and paternity leave.
It's a great question, Sarah. This is a very different Mark Zuckerberg than we saw 3 years ago. At the time of the IPO, I wrote a pretty tough piece on his leadership style that was a cover piece for the Washington Post. It was called Year of the Dragon, which was the year of 2012, is he had a very insular, autocratic style as he stepped in there, and perhaps learning from what he didn't like about Steve Jobs by late career. Steve Jobs, of course, never was being celebrated as a great father, let alone as a great philanthropist. There's probably nobody watching this show less philanthropic than Steve Jobs was, as brilliant as he was and as he's changed the world, is yet still Zuckerberg. It speaks to a different era of business leaders. Is business leaders as folk heroes present themselves as common origins. They have sweeping visions that transform their businesses and the way we all live and work, but they also want to have social impact. Whether or not it was Henry Ford to people in the current era, Ted Turner, is they want to somehow show that they're driving direct impact in the personal model they set. Both as a father and as a philanthropist here, I think it's a very important message that he's trying to show that he's not defining his impact through the walls of Facebook or through their customers. Here's a guy who took over. He had less than a quarter of the ownership of the company, and yet he had 60% of the control. He wasn't going out on IPOs and roadshows. He was arrogantly sending out these videos of himself. Watch that. And wearing the hoodie, and was disdainful of taking other people's money, which he did. Look at the accountability he shows now. Look at the compassion and generosity.
I think your point about him being serially underestimated is well taken. And if they can have the impact,
I agree, Carl. And I think,
Carnegie
Jeff, we
had,
also should say that he's been influenced by Sheryl Sandberg as well. And I think Sheryl's her tragic death of her husband, the letter, and how Mark's really opened up.
We got
about
board. A lot of guys
for
on board.
We got it. You guys are too good together. That's the problem. Jeff, Bill,
Your own show.
thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
Jeff Sonnenfeld,
Thank
Bill
you.
George.